Feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you. Stand in body or spirit and join us in singing 1064, Blue Boat Home. This portion of our service is to support our beloved historical church. This can be accomplished several ways. In addition to the weekly collection, you may send your checks to the church address, which is shown on the screen. You may contribute by PayPal using the QR code, which is also shown on the screen, as well as on the church website and in the newsletter. Stater Brothers Market gives our church a rebate on Stater grocery cards, which we will have in church each Sunday. Amazon gift cards are also available. You get the full value, and the church also receives a percentage for free. Please see Dinah Rowe or Robert Brown in the church office if you are interested in purchasing the gift cards. Please donate as the Spirit moves you by whatever method works best for you. Thank you for your generosity. And to those who give of their time and their talent, thank you for your generous care and attention. And to all of you who have joined us here today, thank you for the gift of your presence. Will our ushers now please come forward to receive the collection? A bag will also be passed around to collect food and hygiene items for those in need. Our next hymn is number 402, From You I Receive, from the Gray Hymnal. Feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you. Please stand in body or spirit and join us in singing hymn. Our meditation today is by author and activist Starhawk. Our way out involves both resistance and renewal, saying no to what is so that we can reshape and recreate the world. Our challenge is communal, but to face it, we must be empowered as individuals and create structures of support and celebration that can teach us freedom. Creation is the ultimate resistance, the ultimate refusal to accept things as they are, for it is in creation that we encounter mystery. Now let us pause for a moment of silence. And now I would like to introduce William Casey, speaking to us on engineering the soul with crayons.
Water, check. Paper, check. Existential dread, on tap. Now, this is a follow-up on an earlier sermon that I wrote and read a few weeks ago. And in that paper, I spoke of being a recovering hoarder and how you could use anti-hoarding techniques and functional minimalism to clean up our rooms, our houses, and most importantly, our spiritual practices. And just like when you clean your room and actually find a 20 in your pockets, you can find old ideas and glue them together to your new ideas and be that much better off. We're trying to pull off the contradictions, the redundancies, and the stuff that no longer fits your everyday personal beliefs. But reducing our beliefs and re-examining choices we made, it's only one way to go. And then the idea of Georg Hegel came to my mind. It's like, let's go bigger. And I'll be attempting to use simile and metaphor to show how certain techniques by Georg Hegel can enrich our lives. And, for a while, produce a faster and more detailed restructuring of our mental and spiritual practices before it breaks down again, like big items do. Hegel was a German philosopher, lived from 1770 to 1830. He had a Lutheran base to a lot of his thought. He's the one who gave us that now that the phrase that you've probably all heard of before: thesis, antithesis, synthesis, which can then become a new thesis, antithesis, synthesis. You can see how it would build on each other and how you're basically building towards something. And essentially, as I said, the synthesis becomes the new thesis if you need it to be that. What you're eventually working towards is an idea that's useful for field use, so that you can use. In modern times, we fact check the heck out of everything, so that's one of the problems with the idea of thesis, antithesis. And please note that humans are quite capable of using big systems that don't fit them for basically centuries upon end. So under the idea that the examined life is the one worth living, this is a good idea. But there's also this. There's nothing like looking at a sermon that you're going to be giving within a day or two and hearing a phrase like the problem with Georg Hegel. But this is after you have committed to the statement, of course. So, a lot of fun on that. But still, Hegel's ability to hit bigger picture was really appealing, and why I stayed with him. In the old days, nonpartisan lawmakers would use this idea of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis together. I'm going to have to find a way to say that quicker. My lips are tangling up in it. But today's rapid pacing is rough. It makes it harder to create them, and there might be heavier criticism along the way. So when you are looking at this idea, you're looking at it possibly more for your own personal use, but be aware that that it does have a breakdown factor that the anti-hoarding stuff did not have. Remember when I spoke of our in the other piece, the anti-hoarding piece, about our spiritual spaces being filled with loose, non-functional parts? Cluttered and not always coherent. Hegelian thought seems to play with that idea too. You start out but with Hegelian stuff, it works sort of like this. You start off with this big, dramatic, theatrical space, and then it becomes, you ask big questions like, what is a conservative, a good conservative? What is a liberal? What are the advantages and disadvantages of each? How can I combine and optimize them? Or how can I kill most of the errors in one system, hopefully lumped into 2 or 3 bunches, or into smaller bunches, so that you can concentrate on killing the errors? Then once you ask the big questions, then you work for your synthesis. Basically, it's the thing, the anti-thing, and the combination. With some of Hegel's techniques, we're given a dynamic that's more like a properly built home. Instead of a force that is acting, it is a lasting framework that we move within and around. Like, as I said, like a properly built home, or rotate your eyes upwards, a church. Take the beams of this building. They're placed at an angle that is countered by keystones and the same force pushing in the other direction. No accident. Many things hold together because of the forces that aim it upwards. A little like a house of cards, but maybe with a more spiritual background. But you have the important thing is the forces are balancing each other. Anybody remember an old film a series called The Flying Nun? Sally Struthers, I think. And she had this one liner there: "When lift plus thrust overcome weight plus drag, anything will fly." Ask anyone in Kansas who's seen a Buick going by their window. It's with this push-pull, we've got some force that we can work with. So take it as architecture. Take it not as something more temporary. Hegel's, but there are some flaws within them that can bring down the structure, and you have to come to grips with them. The model will exist for some time, which is good for us. Thunderbolts roar, avalanches fall and then are still. Fires stop and start again and burn out. Architecture stays around, gives us a chance to hang all of our ideas, our other stuff on. If I want to be a liberal, that idea might leave when disproven to be, but not before. But wait a second. We're talking about a certain amount of dualism tucked in there. So since we want the system to be durable and rich and rewarding, we need to do something. We need to deal with the push-pull, make sure they're at least at balance in order to have our structure moving. Sooner or later, there are numerous qualities that a conservative or a liberal might put a different value on. A conservative might value the rule of law, where a liberal might value mercy. A conservative might value hierarchy and the ordered way of doing things, whereas a liberal might value openness and accessible to the system. And you have to make sure on one thing that see how the force, if you look up again, you'll see how the forces are here and balanced. Now, if those forces were imbalanced, scattered, you might be looking at falling beams and so on in the building. You don't want that. It's I've never had a day that started out by wanting to have a log come catapulting into the middle of my breakfast cereal. We want a working synthesis, though. How do we do it? Well, let's try to lump a few of the flaws together and get them back to a nice vertical cut. You do it by lumping the forces together so that you can then, using one cure, solve 2 or 3 questions in a row. It's you can cover several improvements at once that way. If I were a conservative, I might want to sit there and say, I'm really going to have to concentrate on a certain amount of the money because I'm going to want it to go with, spend no money on corrupt lawyers, spend no money on corrupt politicians, no money on corrupt cops, and make sure that I'm not being overtly active in racist behaviors. So that one thing, watch the money and make sure it's ethical, can cover several different problems that you've got with a conservative structure. A liberal might have some trouble with the money too, probably mostly along the idea of, well, where's the money coming from? That annoying line they always use when they suddenly pretend that that there isn't a bureaucrat amongst them who has an accounting degree. Yeah, that's always amusing. But again, you're dealing with the money. You have to make sure that the people are happier, but you have less in the bank. And and that is your push-pull that helps keep the beams in line in terms of your being a liberal. Now, you might be sort of seeing the pattern. You see that you can either have nothing outstanding in terms of what the structure does, but that also means it's not doing what you want it to do. Or you can have 2 or 3 flaws that are used to say, as long as I fuel this, I can build a higher, more glorious roof and do more with the space that I've got. And you'll notice something else. The Hegelian model goes big, which is kind of what I wanted. I didn't want to have a setup that was, instead of working small improvements within myself, I wanted to see if I could not only have an improvement in myself, but maybe something lasting that would do some good for the world at large, solve several problems, and keep me from having to deal with it every time I looked up. And I wanted to look, but the Hegelian solutions, unfortunately, do not last the way I would want them to do. Because for one thing, an administration that might be using Hegelian law might be hit with a series of questions or problems that don't connect with the flaw that you are trying to deal with. An example for that would be I believe it was Eisenhower or Johnson who had to deal with, he was trying to work for Black America, but he also had a problem with the Vietnam War. Dissimilar things that came together and forced him out of being as effective as he'd like to be. But don't believe that we have such an awesome synthesis to do all things for all people at all times, or possibly even ourselves. A conservative mindset might keep money in the bank, but you're not going to go out on the weekends and go dancing, even though now is a perfectly good time for it. We need to have some faith in the structures that we have. The tricky part about the Hegelian model is, do I have faith in your system? Do I trust it to work? Can it work for a world? I mean, we've already got the whole thesis, antithesis thing going. So somebody didn't like the original thesis enough to create the antithesis to make a change, which you're starting right off the bat with a sizable minority that doesn't like what you were doing, which is incredibly frustrating. One reason why many people prefer to keep it smaller and more personal when it comes to their philosophy is because every time you go big, you're stuck and chained to every other person in the room who may be making a dramatic mistake and dragging you along with them. But your belief is valid for you, but like I said, do I have the faith of your idea? Can you convince me of the idea of that you guys have got the right idea? Which, by the way, right over here on the wall, on a bad day, I have a hard time with about 5 and 6. It's difficult for me. Do I trust democracy right now? Do I The right of conscience, it's like, well, I've seen some people do some awful things with that lately over the last few years. So that is not the easiest thing in the world, but it is a reminder anytime you're doing a structure of self-help to put your faith in it, to be something more than there's a moment where things move from the spiritual, or excuse me, from the mental into the spiritual. That first time you say, it's not just that the numbers look bad and it's embarrassing to be in this place. But when you start thinking about how many people are hurting because they did something a different way, then you've got something bigger than what you started scribbling on. You suddenly realize that you are in this thing for the long haul, and you're in it because you found something that works, that is right, that is true, that it beckons and beacons, it beckons to you and it beacons to the rest of the world if you write the paper right. And that is one of the things to review. You gotta go through more steps with Hegel than you do with the hoarding model. The hoarding model is small and comfortable. Nobody cares how little floor space I once had. Nobody, there's, with the Hegelian model, there's a lot of compare and contrast. And how do I keep the problems lined up in order for you to go at keeping the roof up and keeping it high, and not just going for a squarish, small little world that doesn't have room for anybody else. You want to have something that goes a little higher. You have to check on the flaws more frequently because they will stack on themselves. Any of you people who've worked in education know how much the Monday that you missed getting the paperwork in, how bad it gets by Thursday. It's but like I say, link your flaws together if you possibly can, because that'll give you 2 or 3 things you can go after. There are conservative folks I've known who, because they did that properly, were not so suddenly, with hard work from their end, capable of being a human with a working game plan, as opposed to a caricature with no game plan and scarce any utility. They worked at it. They grouped their problems. They struck efficiently at the problems, and they did something that moved them out of where they were because they took some time to look at their personal plans for how they acted and how they lived and how they moved and how they moved through the world and how they carried other people. And they made themselves something other than a hairless ape tromping his way along from cradle to grave. Made him bigger, more human, more the kind of human we'd like to be, rather than what we all too often are. Hegel is a pain in the butt, but there is this as well. The reach of it, the chance to cover a great expanse of space and fill it with an idea that's working, God, on a good day, maybe 80% of the time. You realize how huge that is? That's gigantic. It was interesting comparing the two. The hoarding stuff had a quick start because, like I said, nobody really wants to know all those details about other people. But the asking the questions of yourself when you've gotten out of the habit of saying, "Hey, what makes you happy? What fits? What links to other things that you love? What works?" The stuff grouped together nicely, and it had variations on a theme. With Hegel, it's really hard to escape the politics because you're going for a big picture, and my picture is going to bump into yours and yours into mine. And the whole thesis, antithesis thing seems like it's producing inevitably some flaws. And I hate building flaws into the thing that I'm doing because it's sort of like house fall down and go boom. I don't want that, especially if I haven't gotten paid for the building yet. The anti-hoarding thing was intimate and complex. The Hegelian stuff was better for the political grand gesture, but it's also more vulnerable. But with its vulnerability, you look at it and you use it because it can reach many, many more people than the smaller stuff. Hegel was fun. Looking at the various flaws and merits, you sort of like a pick and choose thing. You're building a character for a game or something. You say, okay, I'm going to make a +4 strength with an allergy to seafood and see how it runs in the middle of a game or something like that. But fixing Hegel is awkward because you fix the thesis, then the antithesis changes. And the idea is that you're trying to go for some sort of an optimized system. They don't really care if you could be a comfortable, happy, efficient conservative or liberal if the other system would be quote unquote better. Maybe that's part of the reason why I'm looking at the anti-hoarding system. I get tired sometimes. And even in small doses, I'd like to make a change, a good change. And now seems like a pretty good time.
Our closing hymn is number 1007. There's a river flowing in my soul, from the Teal hymnal. Feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you. Please stand in body or spirit and join us in singing 1007. There's a river flowing in my soul.
There's a river flowing
May the walls of this house be strong in the face of storms, whether of winds or of words, whether of thunder or of tyranny. May the windows of this house be clear to the world's light, whether of dawns or of daring, whether of sunsets or of stillness. May the foundations of this house be firm upon the good earth, whether of soil or of sharing, whether of bedrock or of behavior. May the doors of this house be wide to all that come from afar, whether poems or people, whether songs or strangers. May this house embrace, like a graceful chalice, the flame it cannot define or limit, as a heart enshrines hopes larger than its beating walls. Namaste, amen, and blessed be. Thank you, Bill, for sharing your valuable time and insights with us this morning. It is sincerely appreciated, and we look forward to hearing from you again. We will now have 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A and discussion following the service for those who wish to share your thoughts on today's topic. Be aware that this will be included on the video that is posted online. Would anyone like to come up and share their thoughts? And if anyone online would like to do the same, feel free to raise your hand. Come on up, Tinka.
Bill, it's really just a comment. When you were talking about keeping a structure up and sort of counterforces are necessary in order to keep it strong and upright, metaphorically, spiritually, that really touched me. And I think that will help me because I think, like most of us, I want things to go smoothly. I don't want a lot of external negative forces coming at me. And so I try to minimize that. And that can be really frustrating because that may be out of my control. So I really appreciate, that's the one thing, actually, the biggest thing that I'm taking away from your talk today is that I need to look perhaps at those negative forces that I feel are coming at me and revision it, that perhaps it's a force that's necessary to keep me strong, to keep me upright. So it definitely is gave me food for thought. It's something I need to play with and to see. But I think that will help me instead of the woe is me, all this stuff, that looking at it actually as something that can be beneficial to me. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you very much. That means a lot. I'm not crazy about the negative forces a lot of the time. The country was put together on enlightened self-interest, and I think that taken properly, if you can do it without hating the guy who's giving you the counterforces, which they didn't even manage all the time, but being able to look at the counterforces and say, hey, we want the best law to come out of this, not the obstructionism that we have today, but in the old days when it was like, okay, I'm not fond of you. I know you're not fond of me. And this room is too hot and sticky for both of us, but we're neither one of us leaving until we get a decent law that we can show. And just knowing that you can counterbalance and make something happen, and that building for it right off the bat, knowing that it's going to be there, and that I'm going to screw up in certain predictable ways if I'm going to be a liberal. Somebody else is going to do it as a conservative. And that if we can operate without hate, we can really help each other out and produce a better system for us all. Yeah, thank you. Come on over.
Thank you, Bill. I have a quote and I have a question.
Okay.
Apparently Hegel is one of the hardest philosophers to understand.
Yeah, I was not encouraged when I saw them saying the problem with Hegel, and I like hip deep in the sermon, and I'm trying to sit there going, and I'm hip deep, and I just can't remember whether I jumped into the swamp head first or not. And this is going to be tough.
Well, I'm glad you took the challenge, right? Okay, so the quote from Hegel, good quote. Only one man ever understood me, and he didn't understand me.
I'm feeling better. I'm feeling better.
And my question is, how'd you come up with the engineering the soul with crayons? What is that?
Well,
does that mean?
partially because it's if I screw up and I'm using crayons, they won't come down on me as hard as if I'm using a formal blue pen and executive writing style.
Okay.
Also, the idea that says, I'm going to sample from something that works, and I don't care if it's standard or not. If it's got some juice in there that I can use and that we can use, if I squeeze it properly, I'm down for it. I'll do it.
Okay. So crayons are less intimidating.
Yes. There's
and colorful.
Yes. There's an old saying out there. It's an engineering statement line, and I've used it before. Measure by micrometer. Subtle, precise. Color it with crayon. Yeah, well, the power line should be somewhere in there, Jeffy. I'll know if you have an afro after you're done drilling, if you found it or not.
Try to stay within the line.
Yeah, try to stay in the line. I'm giving you thick lines. And then cut it with an axe, because the world does not give us precise solutions.
That's a counterforce.
Yeah, yeah. That's also the idea that says, "Oh, you wanted a precise cure to the problem."
Also, for me, crayons are playful.
Yeah.
And so I think that sometimes when we take a very dense, heavy subject or, that we're trying to really get down into, that it's nice to be playful in the midst of that. So you don't drown in all
Yeah,
of
like, fix your politics, find the one true thing that's supposed to work best.
Mhm.
And crayon. I like the crayon.
I also, something else popped in my head, a second thing that I'm taking away. When you were talking about, as you go through your life, sometimes it's easier and sometimes it's harder. And you were talking about even with having the structure that we have with our principles, that possibly now, given the political climate and everything else, that it's even sort of questioning some of those, or perhaps not as firmly able to hang on to them as we did in the past. And I can relate to that. And in fact, when you were talking about right of conscience, it suddenly, hit me. Here I am trying to live my life, being fair, and looking at both sides and not making judgments and everything else. And I realized when you said that from the time I came to this church and read those, like the right of conscience, it was like, oh yes, like that's a big, strong thing I can hang on to. That's a big piece for me. And then when I'm hearing you say it now, I thought, well, you know what? I'm like, oh yes, those of us who back in the day who opposed the Vietnam War, right? We stood up for our right of conscience. Now when we're, variety of different things. But then I have to stop and think, okay, what about the people, the anti-abortionists? What about the people who, kind of all these people who I disagree with? They have a right of conscience. They have a right to protest. They have a right to lobby their politicians to vote the way they want them to. They have the right, to give money on campaigns to try and
Change
elect
laws,
their
yeah.
people, right, and change things and get the Supreme Court. And so all the things that upset me so much, they have the same right, the right of conscience. And if their conscience is telling them that this is the right thing to do based on their ethical standing, the teachings they got from their religion, that again gave me something more to think about, that I need to really realize they have the same rights that I do.
Yeah.
And I can't really belittle them for using their rights.
The one that drove me nuts is on number 5, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. Sounds great, right? The Muslim Brotherhood of Egypt said, let us, for the only time we're ever going to say this, use democracy. How many people want a theocracy? Motion passed. We'll never use the democratic process again. What am I supposed to do with that? Drives me nuts, but okay. Anyone else? Walt?
There was a reference to the Vietnam War. That was quite a battle back then, because when you oppose a war where Americans are actually dying, it gets really hot. We went to the Spokane Unitarian Church, my parents and I, and we went on a short parade, which I thought was similar to our hometown. I looked and there was row upon row, or side by side, I should say, of motorcycles and police on them. And there was a lot of shouting, and I assumed that people were shouting shouts of joy, just like at our little hometown parade. In fact, they were screaming that they wanted to beat the crap out of us. Well, the Spokane Unitarian minister led the march, and we only went like a block, maybe 2 blocks. That was the end of it. I was too young to realize how controversial and how much danger we were in. But Unitarianism, just as the 2 Justins who were kicked out of the state legislature, maybe you noticed that when the blonde lady defended the 2 Justins, part of that discussion and defense was done in a Unitarian church. Unitarian churches are inherently liberal, just the way they are. Thank you.
I also wanted to comment, especially a thought brought up by what you said, Tinka, about the right of conscience and how it is important for us to remember that, everyone has their own mind and their own conscience and what they believe is right. And it is important for us to honor that. But it is also important for us to remember the paradox of tolerance, that it is important for us to be tolerant of other people and their beliefs, with the sole exception being intolerance itself. That if what they believe and if their actions are themselves intolerant, then it is not right for us to say, oh, well, that's just what they'll believe, I'll let them be. Like, yeah, sure, thought crimes do not exist. I do not blame someone for their thoughts or beliefs, but, if someone is, lobbying their politicians to take rights away from people, that's not okay. And that's not, my conscience says that it is morally objectionable to just let that happen and say, oh, well, that's what they believe. I guess it's really important to them. I'll just let them go about what they're doing, because what they're doing is spreading intolerance, and that should not be tolerated according to my conscience. So it's, all these things are complicated and make you think, and a lot of these things, I think one of the things that I love about the UU Church is that it is very much not a church of, we will tell you what is right and wrong and you will listen and not think for yourself. That our whole thing is, here are some ideas, think for yourself, contemplate, come to your own decisions. And I think this is a perfect example of this is one of the topics that I have sat with myself and had, internal debates and internal conflict and thought, what is right, what is wrong? And I have come to my own decision and come to settle within my own conscience what I believe is right. And like I said, that's one of the things I love about the UU Church, that is encouraged.
There's also a phrase that occasionally gets used by somebody who thinks that you're helping someone else outvote them. They always call you a useful idiot. It's like, how dare you use your right of conscience in a way that inconveniences me.
Nick Williams, thank you, Bill. I really enjoyed this sermon, and a bit of it was deeper than my brain can go, but that's all right. It still opened up avenues for me to think about, and I appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you. That means something. That means a lot. Well, if we're done here, then I'm sure there's coffee and empty calories for us to lay into. Thank you so much. This worked out a lot, frankly, better than I thought it was going to.
Thank you, Bill.